You broke vows, I break metal.
The hotel room in Albany felt like every other generic business trip accommodation I'd endured in my 15 years as a detective. Beige walls, scratchy comforter, and that peculiar smell of industrial cleaning products mixed with decades of other people's lives. I propped my laptop on the nightstand and dialed home through video chat, expecting to see Elise's familiar face framed by our bedroom's soft lighting. "Hey, beautiful," I said when she answered, though something immediately felt off. Her smile seemed forced, and she kept glancing away from the camera. "Tell me, how's the conference?" Elise's voice carried that artificially bright tone she used when she was hiding something. In 22 years of marriage, I'd learned to read her tells like a suspect's nervous tics. "Boring as hell. Just wanted to see your face before I stopped mid-sentence. Behind Elise, on my side of our king-size bed, sat a gleaming red Rolex Submariner. The thing probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Nice new clock, babe," I said, keeping my voice casual despite the ice forming in my stomach. "I guess Santa shops at Cartier now." Elise's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, that old thing. Andrea left it here when she came by earlier. You know how she is with her jewelry." Right. Andrea, who drove a 10-year-old Honda and bought her watches at Target. My cop instincts were screaming now, but I kept my expression neutral. "Well, tell her she's got expensive taste. I should get some sleep. Love you." "Love you too," she said, ending the call with suspicious speed. I sat in the darkness of that hotel room, mind racing. 22 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house in Millbrook's nicest neighborhood. Elise was the creative director at Haynes & Associates, the town's premier advertising agency. She made twice what I earned as a detective, and lately she'd been working longer hours, coming home with expensive gifts for herself, claiming they were bonuses or client appreciation presents. The red Rolex wasn't Andrea's. I'd bet my pension on it. I pulled up the police department's security system on my laptop. One of the perks of being a senior detective was remote access to the town's surveillance network. Our street had cameras at both ends, installed after a string of break-ins 2 years ago. I scrolled through the footage from the past 3 days, and there it was, a silver BMW M5 in our driveway Tuesday night. The license plate belonged to Carter Haynes, Elise's boss and the owner of the agency. My hands shook as I reached for my phone to cancel the rest of the conference. The red-eye flight from Albany to Boston gave me 6 hours to plan. By the time I landed at Logan, I'd made a decision that would either save my marriage or destroy it completely. I called Elise's parents from the airport. "Linda, it's Tom. I got done with the conference early and thought we could surprise Elise with breakfast. You know how she loves your blueberry pancakes." My mother-in-law's voice warmed immediately. "What a wonderful idea, George and I will be there at 8:30. She'll be so surprised." Surprised was one word for it. I arrived home first, parking around the corner and walking through our backyard. The silver BMW was there again, tucked behind Elise's Lexus like they were trying to hide it. My key turned silently in the back door, and I could hear voices from the kitchen. Intimate laughter, the clink of coffee mugs, the rustle of fabric. When Linda and George knocked on the front door at exactly 8:30, I answered it with a grim smile. "She's in the kitchen," I said, loud enough to carry through the house. "Let's go surprise her." We found them at the breakfast bar, Elise in her silk robe, hair disheveled, and Carter Haynes in his expensive suit pants and an unbuttoned dress shirt. His face went white when he saw us. Elise's coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the Italian tile floor. "Don't get up on our account," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Oh, you already did," Linda gasped. George muttered something under his breath. Carter scrambled for his jacket and shoes like the house was on fire. "Tom, this isn't what it looks like," Elise started, but I held up my hand. "Really?" "Because it looks like my wife is having breakfast with her boss while wearing nothing but a robe at 8:30 in the morning. In our house." After he left his watch on my side of the bed, I walked to Carter, who was frantically trying to button his shirt. "You forgot something upstairs," I said, pulling the red Rolex from my pocket. I'd retrieved it while waiting for the in-laws. "But you can keep the time you wasted." I threw the watch at his head. It bounced off his forehead and clattered across the floor. "Tomeu!" Elise shrieked. "Get out," I said to Carter. "Now, before I remember I'm a cop and start thinking about trespassing charges." Carter grabbed his belongings and fled through the front door. I helped him along by throwing his suit jacket after him, watching it land in Linda's prized rose bushes. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda stood frozen by the kitchen island, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. George's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. And Elise, my wife of 22 years, the mother of my children, the woman I'd built my entire adult life around, stared at me with something that looked disturbingly like hatred. "How dare you humiliate me like this?" she hissed. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "I humiliated you? Lady, you humiliated yourself. I just provided the audience." The next few days passed in a blur of accusations, tears, and lawyers. Elise moved in with her parents, taking our 18-year-old daughter Kayla with her. Kayla had always been team mom anyway, Daddy's little girl until she turned 13 and decided I was embarrassing. Our 20-year-old son Jack came home from college as soon as I called him. He found me in the garage at midnight, working on my old Camaro and nursing a beer. "Dad? Mom's affair. Is it true?" I looked up from the engine I was pretending to fix. Jack had my height, but Elise's sharp features, and right now his face was a mask of barely controlled anger. "Yeah, son, it's true. With her boss? That pretentious a-hole in the BMW?" "Language," I said automatically, then shook my head. "But yeah, Carter Haynes." Jack sat on an overturned crate, running his hands through his hair. "Jesus, Dad, what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going down without a fight." That's when I told him about my plan. The next morning, I walked into the Millbrook Police Department like any other day, but I had a mission. My partner, Ray Martinez, looked up from his paperwork when I settled at my desk. "You look like hell, Bishop. Everything okay at home?" Ray had been my partner for 8 years. He was one of the few people who knew about Elise's increasingly frequent business dinners and weekend client meetings. I'd never said anything directly, but Ray was a good cop. He could read between the lines. "Elise is having an affair with Carter Haynes." Ray's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "Crap, Tom, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Help me destroy him." I spent the next 3 hours using every resource available to me as a detective. Carter Haynes had a clean record. No arrests, no warrants. But he wasn't as squeaky clean as he pretended. 17 unpaid parking tickets over the past 2 years. A gym membership paid for by his company, which was questionable since it was an upscale spa that offered private wellness sessions with attractive female trainers. Most interesting of all, he'd been charging personal expenses to the company credit card, dinners at romantic restaurants, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases. Nothing illegal enough to arrest him for, but plenty to make his life complicated. I called Harper Wilson, who worked in HR at Haynes Associates. Harper had always disliked Carter's entitled attitude and had been passed over for promotion twice because she wasn't part of his inner circle. "Harper, it's Tom Bishop. I have some information you might find interesting about your boss." By lunch, Carter was suspended pending an internal investigation. Jack turned out to be more devious than I'd given him credit for. While I was working the official channels, he was waging war on social media. Carter's Instagram account, which was full of photos of expensive watches, luxury cars, and business meetings at 5-star restaurants, suddenly had new content. "Not everything expensive is worth having," read Carter's latest post, accompanied by a photo of a broken Rolex. The comments section exploded with speculation. Carter's friends and business associates started putting pieces together, especially when someone anonymously shared photos of him leaving our house that morning. Elise called me screaming, "What did you do?" "Everyone at work is talking about Carter and me. Someone posted photos of him at our house. I didn't post anything," I said truthfully. "Maybe you should have thought about discretion before you decided to redecorate our bedroom with your boss." "This is maltreatment, Tom. I'm calling my lawyer." "Go ahead, but make sure you tell him about the infidelity." "That's still relevant in Massachusetts divorce proceedings." The line went dead. That evening, Jack and I went to the Blue Bucket, Millbrook's combination cop bar in Gossip Central. The place was packed with off-duty officers, firefighters, and the usual collection of town busybodies who treated the bar like their personal information exchange. Ray was already there, along with Malik Johnson, a rookie detective who idolized me for reasons I'd never understood. Word about Elise's affair had spread through the department faster than a flu virus. "Bishop, you," called out Lieutenant Murphy from across the room. "Heard you're back on the market. My wife's got a sister." "Thanks, but I'm not ready for that conversation yet," I said, settling onto a bar stool. The bartender, a former cop named Danny who'd retired after taking a bullet in the shoulder, slid me a beer without being asked. "On the house, Tom? Sorry about the situation." That's when Linda and George walked in. My in-laws had never set foot in the Blue Bucket in the 22 years I'd known them. They considered it beneath their social status, but there they were, dressed in their country club finest, scanning the room like they were looking for someone to blame for their daughter's scandal. They found me. Thomas, Linda said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet bar. We need to talk. Every conversation in the place stopped. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume. I'm listening, I said, not getting up from my stool. This whole mess is your fault, George said, his face red with indignation. If you'd been a better husband, Elise never would have. Would have what? I interrupted. Screwed her boss in our bed? Lied to our children? Destroyed 22 years of marriage for a guy who drives a BMW and wears expensive watches? You drove her away with your attitude, Linda said. Your jealousy of her success, your resentment. I stood up slowly. The bar was dead silent now, every eye on us. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. My wife has been having an affair for months. She's been lying to me, to our kids, to everyone. She got caught red-handed with her boss in our house. But somehow, this is my fault because I wasn't supportive enough of her career? She needed someone who understood her ambition, George said. She needed someone who would pay for expensive jewelry and fancy dinners, you mean? Someone who would make her feel special and important while she was lying to her family every single day. I looked around the room at the faces of people I'd known for years, cops who'd backed me up in dangerous situations, neighbors who'd watched our kids grow up, friends who'd been to our house for barbecues and birthday parties. Maybe if you'd taught your daughter about loyalty instead of entitlement, we wouldn't be here, I said. But I guess that's too much to ask from people who think money and status matter more than keeping your word. The silence stretched for what felt like an hour. Then, someone near the back of the room started clapping slowly. Others joined in. Not everyone. Some people looked uncomfortable, and a few seemed to disapprove of the public confrontation, but enough to make Linda and George realize they'd walked into hostile territory. They left without another word. Danny slid me another beer. That took balls, Tom. Or stupidity, I said. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. The next few weeks turned into a war of attrition. Elise hired Rebecca Sterling, the most expensive divorce attorney in the county. I retained Mike O'Brien, a former prosecutor who specialized in cases where one spouse had been unfaithful. The legal bills were already mounting, but I had an advantage. I'd been documenting everything since the night I found the Rolex. Carter tried to return to work after his suspension, but Harper had done her job well. The company's board of directors was asking uncomfortable questions about his expense reports and his relationship with employees. Several clients had expressed concern about the personal drama affecting their accounts. Jack had returned to college, but he was still helping from a distance. Carter's social media accounts continued to be mysteriously updated with embarrassing content. His LinkedIn profile now listed his interests as luxury timepieces and workplace relationships. His company bio had been edited to include specializing in hands-on management techniques. The best part was that Carter couldn't prove who was doing it. His passwords had been compromised, and the IT department couldn't track the source of the unauthorized changes. Meanwhile, Elise was discovering that having an affair with your boss was more complicated than she'd anticipated. When Carter got suspended, she lost her strongest supporter at the agency. Her colleagues were gossiping about her relationship, and several clients had specifically requested different account managers. She tried to blame me for her professional problems. "You're sabotaging my career," she accused during one of our phone conversations about the divorce proceedings. "I'm not doing anything to your career," I said. "You sabotaged it yourself when you decided to sleep with your boss. Actions have consequences, Elise. You're just finally experiencing some." "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, staring at the wall where our family photos used to hang. "Congratulations," I said finally. "I assume Carter's the father?" "Yes." Her voice was small now, not the defiant tone she'd been using for weeks. "Does he know?" "I told him yesterday." "And?" The silence stretched long enough that I knew the answer before she said it. "He wants me to take care of it." I closed my eyes. Despite everything she'd done, despite the lies and betrayal, I felt a stab of sympathy for her. Carter Haynes was showing his true colors, and apparently they weren't as attractive as his expensive suits. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I don't know. I thought he loved me." "Elise, he's a 45-year-old man who cheats on his wife with his employees. What did you think was going to happen?" She hung up on me. 2 days later, Jack called me with information that changed everything. "Dad, you need to hear this. I've been talking to some people who work at Mom's agency. There's a woman named Jenna who used to be friends with Mom before the affair started. She says Mom and Carter were planning to set you up. Set me up how? They were going to claim you were abusive. Mom was going to file a restraining order and say you threatened her when you found out about the affair. Carter was going to be her witness, say he saw bruises on her arms and that she was afraid to go home. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I'd been angry about the affair, hurt by the betrayal, but this was something else entirely. They'd been planning to destroy not just my marriage, but my career, my reputation, my relationship with my children. How does Jenna know this? She overheard them talking about it in Carter's office. She recorded it on her phone. Can she prove it? She's willing to testify if you need her to. She's disgusted by the whole thing. I called Mike O'Brien immediately. Within an hour, we had a meeting set up with Jenna at a coffee shop downtown. She was a nervous woman in her 30s who kept looking over her shoulder like she expected Carter to appear at any moment. I've worked at the agency for 6 years, she said, sliding her phone across the table. I've seen Carter manipulate people before, but this is different. What they were planning to do to you, it's evil. The recording was crystal clear. Elise's voice, talking about how they could neutralize Tom's advantage in the divorce by making him look like a misuser. Carter suggesting they could get a restraining order that would force me out of the house and limit my access to the children. Both of them laughing about how no one would believe a cop could be the sufferer. Mike O'Brien smiled for the first time since I had hired him. This changes everything, Tom. They just handed us the divorce on a silver platter. But I wasn't thinking about the divorce anymore. I was thinking about revenge. I spent the next week planning the most public humiliation I could devise. Carter and Elise thought they were smart, thought they could manipulate the situation to their advantage. They were about to learn that underestimating a detective with 20 years of experience was a serious mistake. I started by inviting everyone to a community meeting at the Blue Bucket on Friday night. I told different people different stories. Some thought it was about Neighborhood Watch, others heard it was a retirement party for Danny the bartender, and a few were told it was an informal town hall about local issues. I made sure Carter and Elise heard that I was planning to make a public apology for my inappropriate behavior during the divorce proceedings. I let it slip through mutual friends that I was ready to take responsibility for my part in the marriage falling apart. They took the bait. Friday night, the Blue Bucket was packed beyond capacity. Off-duty cops, firefighters, town council members, neighbors, co-workers. It seemed like half of Millbrook had shown up. I'd even invited a reporter from the local newspaper, telling her there might be an interesting story about community reconciliation. Carter and Elise arrived together, which was their first mistake. They sat at a table near the front, looking smug and satisfied. Linda and George were there too, along with Kayla, who still believed her mother was the sufferer in all of this. Jack had driven down from college and was standing near the bar with Ray and Malik. He gave me a subtle thumbs up. I stood up and called for everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said, my voice carrying easily through the crowded room. I know there's been a lot of talk lately about my personal situation, and I thought it was time to set the record straight. Elise smiled, probably thinking she was about to witness my public surrender. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my wife was having an affair with her boss, Carter Haynes. I caught them together in our house, in our bedroom, and I was angry. I said some things and did some things that I probably shouldn't have. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Carter was nodding like he approved of my apparent contrition. But then I learned something that changed my perspective entirely. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the bar's sound system. Danny had helped me set it up earlier. I learned that the affair was just the beginning. My wife and her lover had planned something much worse. I pressed play. Elise's voice filled the room. We need to neutralize Tom's advantage in the divorce. If we can make him look like a misuser, Carter's response, a restraining order would force him out of the house and limit his access to the children. More of Elise's voice. No one would believe a cop could be the sufferer, both of them laughing. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that crowded bar. Every eye in the room was on Elise and Carter, who looked like they wanted the floor to open up and swallow them. So yes, I continued, I was angry when I found out about the affair, but I think most people would agree that I had good reason to be angry. And I think most people would also agree that planning to file false misuse charges is a lot worse than throwing a watch at someone's head. The crowd erupted. People were shouting, some in anger, some in support. Carter tried to stand up, probably to deny everything or make excuses, but the hostile stares from 24 off-duty cops convinced him to sit back down. Linda and George looked mortified. Kayla was staring at her mother with an expression of dawning horror. The recording you just heard was made by a witness who was disgusted by what she overheard, I said when the noise died down. It's been authenticated and will be presented as evidence in our divorce proceedings, along with documentation of Carter's expense account fraud, his pattern of workplace maltreatment, and his history of extramarital affairs. That last part was a bluff. I hadn't found evidence of other affairs, but Carter's face went white, which told me I'd hit close to home. I'm not asking for sympathy, I continued. I just wanted everyone to know the truth before they heard whatever lies might be spread about me in the coming weeks. My wife and her lover tried to destroy my life, my career, and my relationship with my children. They failed. I looked directly at Elise. You wanted a clean break, honey. Congratulations. You got one. The crowd began to disperse, but not before dozens of people approached me to offer support, shake my hand, or pat me on the shoulder. The reporter was frantically taking notes. Carter and Elise sat frozen at their table, trapped by the crowd and their own humiliation. Jack appeared at my elbow. Dad, that was brutal. They had it coming. Kayla pushed through the crowd toward us, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought Mom was telling the truth about you being controlling and jealous. I hugged my daughter for the first time in months. It's okay, sweetheart. She's still your mother. This doesn't change that. But what she did, what they were planning, is between your mother and me. You don't have to choose sides. But even as I said it, I knew she already had. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and social fallout. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the affair and the attempted fraud. Carter was fired from his agency, and his wife filed for divorce. Elise lost her job when 3 major clients pulled their accounts, citing concerns about ethical standards and professional conduct. The Massachusetts Bar Association opened an investigation into Rebecca Sterling's knowledge of her client's planned perjury. She withdrew from the case rather than face potential sanctions. Elise moved out of her parents' house when Linda and George told her they were disappointed in her choices and needed time to process everything. She ended up in a studio apartment across town, working as a freelance graphic designer for a fraction of her former salary. Carter tried to salvage his reputation by claiming he was the sufferer of a vindictive husband's smear campaign, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His expense account fraud alone was enough to blacklist him from every reputable agency in New England. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Mike O'Brien presented the evidence of infidelity, the planned false accusations, and Elise's attempts to hide marital assets. The judge awarded me the house, custody of both children, and a financial settlement that would keep me comfortable for years. 3 months after that night at the Blue Bucket, I was sitting in my backyard grilling burgers for Jack and Kayla when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I recognized Elise's voice immediately. Tom, it's me. What do you want, Elise? I wanted to apologize for everything. The affair, the lies, what we were planning to do to you. It was wrong. I looked at my children, both of whom were watching me carefully. Jack was home for spring break, and Kayla was finishing her senior year of high school. They'd both chosen to live with me full-time, though they still saw their mother occasionally. Apology noted, I said. I lost the baby. I felt a stab of something, not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. I'm sorry to hear that. Carter won't return my calls. I think he's seeing someone else. That's not my problem anymore, Elise. I know, I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I threw away, what we had. What we had was 22 years and 2 kids, I said. That's not nothing, but it's not enough to erase what you did. Is there any chance? No. The line was quiet for a long moment. I hope you're happy, Tom. I really do. I'm getting there. After she hung up, I rejoined my children at the picnic table. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was peaceful in a way that our house hadn't been for years. Was that Mom? Kayla asked. Yeah? What did she want? To apologize? Jack snorted. Little late for that. It's never too late to apologize, I said. But it doesn't mean you have to accept it or that it changes anything. 6 months later, I was promoted to detective lieutenant. Ray Martinez became my new partner, and Malik Johnson took Ray's old position. The 3 of us worked well together, and the department's clearance rate improved significantly under our leadership. I started dating a teacher named Susan who had no connection to my previous life. She was kind, intelligent, and refreshingly honest about her intentions and expectations. We took things slowly, both of us being cautious about jumping into anything serious. Jack graduated college with honors and got a job with a cybersecurity firm in Boston. Kayla was accepted to 3 different universities and chose to study journalism, saying she wanted to expose liars and hold powerful people accountable. I was proud of both of them. 1 year after the confrontation at the Blue Bucket, I ran into Carter at a gas station on the edge of town. He was driving a beat-up Honda and wearing clothes from a discount store. He'd aged badly. His hair was thinning, his face was drawn, and he looked like a man who'd lost everything. He saw me and tried to avoid eye contact, but I walked over to him. "Carter." "Tom." He couldn't meet my eyes. "How are things?" "Fine. Good. I'm working for a small firm in Springfield now." "That's good. Honest work is important." He nodded, still not looking at me. "You know," I said, "I never thanked you." That got his attention. "Thanked me?" "For showing me who my wife really was. For 22 years, I thought I was married to someone with integrity, someone who valued loyalty and honesty. You helped me see the truth." His face reddened. "Tom, don't apologize. You did me a favor. I'm happier now than I've been in years. My kids respect me. My career is going well, and I'm in a relationship with someone who actually values the same things I do." I started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and Carter? That red Rolex you left at my house? I donated it to the Police Benevolent Fund auction. It raised $3,000 for the families of officers eliminated in the line of duty. I thought you'd want to know your watch went to a good cause." I left him standing there, staring after me with his mouth open. That evening, I was having dinner with Susan at a quiet restaurant downtown when she asked me something that made me think. "Do you ever regret how you handled the whole situation with your ex-wife? Some people might say you were too harsh." I considered the question carefully. "I could have handled it differently," I said finally. "I could have been more discreet, more forgiving. I could have tried to work things out or just quietly divorced her without the public confrontation. But she and Carter weren't planning to show me the same courtesy. They were going to destroy my reputation, my career, and my relationship with my children based on lies. They were going to send me to jail if they could manage it." Susan nodded. "So, you don't regret it?" "The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to see who she really was. I wasted years trying to make a marriage work with someone who didn't share my values. I should have paid attention to the signs earlier." "What signs?" "The way she talked about other people when they weren't around. The way she justified cutting corners at work. The way she always had an excuse when she was caught in a lie. Small things, but they added up. And now?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Now I'm with someone who tells me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Someone who keeps her promises. Someone who treats other people with respect," Susan smiled. "Even when they don't deserve it? Especially then. That's how you know someone's character, by how they treat people who can't do anything for them." 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I received an invitation to Carter's wedding. He was marrying his former secretary, a woman 20 years younger than him who'd apparently been impressed by his stories about being persecuted by a vindictive ex-lover's husband. I didn't attend, but I heard from mutual acquaintances that it was a small ceremony at a budget hotel. Carter's new wife was already pregnant, and he was working as a junior account executive at the firm in Springfield, making about a third of what he'd earned at his own agency. Elise had moved to Vermont, where she was working for a nonprofit organization and living in a small apartment above a coffee shop. She'd apparently found religion and was active in her church, though whether that represented genuine repentance or just another attempt to reinvent herself was unclear. I didn't care either way. Jack got engaged to his college girlfriend, a smart, funny woman who worked as a software engineer. Kayla was thriving in college and had started dating a pre-med student who reminded me of myself at that age. Serious, hardworking, and completely devoted to her. Susan and I bought a house together, a smaller place than the one I'd shared with Elise, but with better light and a view of the mountains. We talked about marriage sometimes, but neither of us was in a hurry. We'd both learned that the quality of a relationship mattered more than its legal status. On the 3rd anniversary of that night at the Blue Bucket, Ray and I were working a case involving embezzlement at a local business. The suspect was a middle-aged man who'd been stealing from his employer to fund an expensive lifestyle he couldn't afford on his salary. "Reminds me of someone we used to know," Ray said as we reviewed the evidence. "Carter?" "Yeah, same pattern, living beyond his means, justifying it by claiming he deserved better, eventually getting caught because he got careless. The difference is this guy only stole money," I said. "Carter tried to steal my life and failed spectacularly." "That he did." As we drove back to the station, I reflected on how much had changed in 3 years. My children were successful adults who'd learned valuable lessons about integrity and consequences. My career was more satisfying than it had ever been. My relationship with Susan was built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than habit and convenience. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust my instincts again. I'd ignored the warning signs in my marriage for years, convincing myself that love and commitment were enough to overcome fundamental differences in values. I wouldn't make that mistake again. That evening, Susan and I were sitting on our back porch watching the sun set over the mountains, when she asked me a question that surprised me. "Do you think Elise ever really loved you?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "I think she loved the idea of me," I said finally. "The stability I represented, the respectability, the way I made her feel safe and secure. But I don't think she ever really understood who I was or what mattered to me." "What do you mean?" "She thought my job was just a paycheck, that my principles were negotiable, that my loyalty could be taken for granted. She never understood that those things were fundamental to who I am." "And Carter?" "Carter represented excitement, luxury, the possibility of a more glamorous life. She was willing to throw away everything we'd built together for the chance to be with someone who could buy her expensive jewelry and take her to fancy restaurants." "Do you think she regrets it now?" "Probably, but not for the right reasons. She regrets getting caught, regrets the consequences, regrets losing her comfortable life. I don't think she regrets betraying me or lying to our children or planning to destroy my reputation." Susan was quiet for a moment. "You sound very sure about that." "I am. If she really understood what she'd done wrong, she would have confessed before she got caught. She would have ended the affair and tried to save our marriage. Instead, she doubled down and tried to make me the villain. And that's why you can't forgive her?" "I could forgive the affair," I said. "People make mistakes. Marriages go through rough patches. Sometimes good people do stupid things. But the planning, the deliberate attempt to frame me for misuse, the willingness to destroy my relationship with our children, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice, a series of choices. And Carter? Carter was never my friend, never made me any promises, never owed me anything. He's a hunter who takes advantage of vulnerable women, but that's between him and his conscience. Elise is the one who betrayed 22 years of marriage and 2 children who trusted her. The next morning, I woke up in our comfortable bed next to a woman who'd never lied to me, in a house we'd chosen together, looking forward to a day of meaningful work with partners who had my back. It was a good life, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. I thought about that red Rolex that had started it all, sitting on my nightstand like a ticking bomb. Such a small thing to destroy so much, but maybe that was fitting. Elise and Carter's relationship had been built on small deceptions, little compromises, tiny betrayals that added up to something monstrous. My new life was built on the opposite principle: small acts of honesty, daily choices to do the right thing, consistent behavior that matched my stated values. It was less dramatic than the explosive confrontation that had ended my marriage, but it was more sustainable. As I got ready for work, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked older than I had 3 years ago, but also more content. The stress lines around my eyes had faded, and I carried myself with the confidence of a man who'd faced the worst and survived. My phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Dad, Sarah and I set a date, June 15th next year. Hope you and Susan can make it." I smiled and texted back, "Wouldn't miss it. Congratulations, son." Another text, this one from Kayla. "Got an A on my investigative journalism project. Thanks for teaching me to always verify my sources. Love you, Dad." I forwarded both messages to Susan, who responded with a heart emoji and, "Your kids are amazing. Wonder where they get it from." At the station, Ray was already at his desk, reviewing case files and drinking coffee that could probably strip paint. "Morning, partner," he said. "Ready for another day of fighting crime and protecting the innocent?" "Always," I said, settling into my chair and powering up my computer. "By the way," Ray said, "I heard through the grapevine that Carter's new wife filed for divorce. Apparently she caught him cheating with someone at his office." I shook my head. "Some people never learn. Leopards and spots," Ray agreed. "But hey, at least you're not married to him. Thank God for small favors." As I reviewed the day's cases, I reflected on how different my life might have been if I'd never seen that red Rolex on the video call. I might have gone on for years, maybe decades, living with a woman who didn't respect me, working to support a lifestyle built on lies, raising children who learned that deception and betrayal were acceptable as long as you didn't get caught. Instead, I'd learned the truth, painful as it was. and had the chance to build something better. My children had learned that actions have consequences, that integrity matters more than comfort, and that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you deepest. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life I could be proud of. That afternoon, Susan called to remind me about dinner with her parents. They were visiting from California, and we were taking them to the nicest restaurant in town. It was the kind of evening I would have dreaded during my marriage with Elise, who would have spent the entire meal making subtle criticisms and passive-aggressive comments about my manners, my clothes, or my conversation topics. With Susan, it was just dinner with people who mattered to her, an opportunity to get to know them better and show them that their daughter had chosen well. "Should I pick up flowers for your mom?" I texted back. "She'd love that. Roses if they have them. But anything pretty will work." Simple, straightforward communication. No hidden meanings, no tests to pass, no walking on eggshells. It was amazing how much easier life became when you were with someone who said what they meant and meant what they said. At 5 o'clock, I left the station and drove to the florist shop downtown. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had known me for years and had provided flowers for both of my children's graduations. "Detective Bishopiu," she said when I walked in. "What's the occasion today?" "Dinner with Susan's parents. They're visiting from out of town." Meeting the family, very important. I have some beautiful roses that came in this morning." As she wrapped the flowers, Mrs. Chen asked about Jack and Kayla, both of whom she remembered as polite, well-behaved children. I updated her on their accomplishments, feeling the familiar pride that came with talking about my kids. "You raised them well," she said, handing me the bouquet. "Even after all the trouble with your ex-wife, they turned out to be good people." "They raised themselves mostly. I just tried not to screw them up too badly." "Don't be so modest. Children learn by watching what their parents do, not by listening to what they say. Your children saw you handle a difficult situation with dignity, and they learned from that." Driving home, I thought about Mrs. Chen's words. Had I handled the situation with dignity? The public confrontation at the Blue Bucket had been brutal, designed to humiliate Elise and Carter in front of the entire town. Some people might argue that a more dignified response would have been to handle everything privately, through lawyers and closed-door negotiations. But they hadn't given me that option. They'd planned to destroy me publicly, to brand me as a misuser and a threat to my own family. In that context, exposing their lies and manipulations wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. More importantly, it had shown Jack and Kayla that their father wouldn't be pushed around, wouldn't accept being made a scapegoat for someone else's bad choices. They'd learned that sometimes you have to fight for your reputation, your integrity, and your right to be treated with respect. That evening, dinner with Susan's parents went better than I'd hoped. Her father was a retired engineer who appreciated my methodical approach to police work, and her mother was a former teacher who was impressed by Jack and Kayla's accomplishments. They asked thoughtful questions about my job, my children, and my plans for the future. "Susan tells us you've been through a difficult divorce," her mother said over dessert. "That must have been hard on the children." "It was," I said, "but I think they're stronger for having gone through it. They learned some important lessons about the consequences of dishonesty and betrayal. And about standing up for yourself," Susan added. "Tom didn't just roll over and accept being treated badly. He fought back and he won." Her father nodded approvingly. "A man has to defend his reputation. If you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will." Later that night, as Susan and I were cleaning up the dishes, she asked me something that had obviously been on her mind. "Do you ever worry that what happened with Elise will affect our relationship? That you'll have trust issues or become suspicious of me?" I stopped washing the plate I was holding and looked at her. "Do you give me reason to be suspicious?" "No, of course not, but..." "Then we don't have a problem. I don't distrust all women because one woman betrayed me. I distrust people who lie, who make promises they don't keep, who say one thing and do another. You're not any of those things." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've been watching you for 2 years. I've seen how you treat your friends, your students, your family. I've seen how you handle stress, disappointment, and conflict. You're consistent. You're honest. You're reliable. Those aren't very romantic qualities." I laughed. "Are you kidding? After 22 years with someone who is none of those things, they're the most romantic qualities I can imagine." She smiled and kissed me. "I love you, Tom Bishop. I love you too." As we finished cleaning the kitchen, I reflected on how much my definition of love had changed. With Elise, love had been passion, excitement, the thrill of the unknown. It had also been anxiety, uncertainty, and the constant need to prove myself worthy of her attention. With Susan, love was comfort, security, and the deep satisfaction of being known and accepted for who I really was. It was less dramatic, but infinitely more sustainable. The next morning was Saturday, and I was enjoying a rare day off when Jack called with unexpected news. "Dad, you're not going to believe this. I just ran into Mom at the grocery store." My stomach tightened. "How did that go?" "Weird. She looks different. Older, I guess, but also kind of sad. She asked about you." "What did she want to know?" "If you were happy. If you were still with Susan. If you ever talked about her." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're happy, that Susan is great, and that you've moved on with your life." "How did she react?" "She cried. Right there in the cereal aisle." It was awkward as hell. I felt a familiar stab of something that might have been sympathy. Despite everything she'd done, Elise was still the mother of my children, and hearing that she was struggling didn't give me the satisfaction I'd expected. "Did she say anything else?" "She said she was proud of me and Kayla, and that she knew we turned out well because of you. She said she was sorry for everything and that she hoped someday we could have a relationship again." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd think about it. But honestly, Dad, I don't know if I can trust her again. Every time I think about what she was planning to do to you." "She's still your mother, Jack. What she did to me doesn't change that. But it changes how I see her. I used to think she was this strong, successful woman who had it all figured out. Now, I know she was willing to destroy her own family for a guy who dumped her the minute things got complicated. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Dad. This was a choice. A series of choices. And the fact that she's sorry now doesn't undo the damage she caused." He was right, of course. Elise's regret, however genuine, didn't erase the months of lies, the betrayal of trust, or the attempted character assassination. It didn't give me back the years I'd wasted in a marriage built on false premises, or restore the innocence my children had lost when they learned their mother was capable of such deception. But it also didn't mean she was irredeemable or that she couldn't change. People were capable of growth, of learning from their mistakes, of becoming better versions of themselves. The question was whether that growth was genuine or just another performance designed to get what she wanted. "Just be careful," I told Jack. "If you decide to have a relationship with her, make sure it's on your terms. Don't let her guilt you into anything, and don't trust her completely until she's proven she's really changed." "I will, Dad. Thanks." After we hung up, I told Susan about the conversation. She listened without comment, then asked what I thought about Elise's apparent remorse. "I think she's lonely and regrets the consequences of her choices," I said. "Whether she regrets the choices themselves is harder to say. Does it matter? To me? No. I've moved on. To Jack and Kayla? Maybe. They have to decide for themselves what kind of relationship, if any, they want with their mother. And if they choose to forgive her, that's their choice to make. I won't interfere either way." That afternoon, Susan and I went hiking in the state park, something we did most weekends when the weather was good. It was a beautiful fall day, the leaves just starting to turn, the air crisp and clean. We walked in comfortable silence for most of the trail, enjoying the scenery and each other's company. At the summit, we sat on a bench overlooking the valley, sharing a thermos of coffee and watching hawks circle in the distance. "This is nice," Susan said, leaning against my shoulder. "It is. Do you ever miss the excitement of your old life? The drama, the intensity?" I thought about it. No, drama and intensity are overrated. I'd rather have peace and stability. Even if it's sometimes boring, this isn't boring. This is what happiness actually looks like. Quiet moments, with someone you care about, doing simple things together, not having to worry about hidden agendas or secret betrayals. "You sound like a man who's learned some hard lessons." "I have, but they were lessons worth learning." On the drive home, my phone rang. It was Kayla calling from college. "Dad, Jack told me about running into Mom. I wanted you to know that I'm thinking about reaching out to her." "Okay, how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted. I'm still angry about what she did, but she's my mom. I keep thinking about all the good times we had when I was little, before everything went wrong. Those good times were real, sweetheart. What happened later doesn't erase them. But how do I know she won't hurt me again? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation?" It was a fair question, and one I didn't have a good answer for. "You don't know," I said finally. That's the risk you take when you trust someone who's betrayed you before. All you can do is be smart about it, take things slowly, keep your guard up, and don't give her the power to hurt you again. What would you do? I'd probably give her a chance with conditions. Limited contact at first, no discussion of the past until she's proven she's changed, and clear boundaries about what behavior is and isn't acceptable. And if she crosses those boundaries, then you walk away, knowing you gave her a fair chance and she blew it. Thanks, Dad. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. After I hung up, Susan asked if I was okay. Yeah, I think so. It's hard watching your kids struggle with something like this, but they're both smart and strong. They'll figure it out. And if Elise hurts them again, then I'll be there to help them pick up the pieces. But I can't protect them from making their own choices, even if those choices might lead to pain. That's very mature of you, or very tired. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. That evening, we made dinner together and watched a movie, a quiet end to a peaceful day. As we were getting ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again and realized something had changed. The anger that had driven me for so long, the need for revenge that had consumed me in the months after discovering Elise's betrayal, was gone. In its place was something I hadn't expected, a kind of grateful acceptance. Grateful that I'd learned the truth before, wasting more years in a false marriage. Grateful that my children had seen me stand up for myself and fight for what was right. Grateful that I'd found someone who valued the same things I did and loved me for who I actually was, not who she wanted me to be. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Susan humming in the kitchen. She was making pancakes, something she did on Sunday mornings when we didn't have other plans. It was a small tradition, but it represented everything I valued about our relationship. Consistency, thoughtfulness, the simple pleasure of sharing ordinary moments with someone you cared about. Good morning, she said, kissing me as I poured myself coffee. Sleep well? Like a baby. What's on the agenda today? I thought we could work in the garden this morning. Maybe go to the farmer's market this afternoon. Nothing exciting. Sounds perfect. And it was perfect, in a way that my old life had never been. There were no hidden agendas, no walking on eggshells, no wondering what mood I'd find when I came home from work. Just a peaceful Sunday with a woman who said what she meant and meant what she said. As we worked in the garden, pulling weeds and planting bulbs for next spring, I thought about how different this was from the elaborate landscaping Elise had insisted on at our old house. She'd hired expensive designers and demanded exotic plants that required constant maintenance and professional care. The result had been beautiful, but artificial, more about impressing the neighbors than creating a space we actually enjoyed. Susan's approach was simpler. Native plants that thrived in our climate, vegetables we could actually eat, flowers that attracted birds and butterflies. It was less showy but more sustainable, and it reflected her practical, down-to-earth personality. Penny, for your thoughts, she said, noticing that I'd stopped working. Just thinking about how much I like this, I said, gesturing at the garden, the house, the quiet Sunday morning. It's not complicated, but it's real. Real is underrated. Yes, it is. That afternoon at the farmer's market, we ran into several people I knew from work and around town. Everyone was friendly and seemed genuinely happy to see us together. It was a far cry from the awkward encounters I'd endured in the months after my divorce, when people didn't know what to say or which version of events to believe. Now, 3 years later, the story had settled into accepted fact. Tom Bishop's wife had cheated on him with her boss. They'd planned to frame him for misuse, he'd exposed them publicly, and he'd moved on with his life. It was a cautionary tale that people told to illustrate the importance of integrity and the consequences of betrayal. Detective Bishopiu called out Mrs. Patterson, who ran the local flower stand. How are those roses working out for you? Great, thanks. Susan loves them. Good, good. You know, I always said you were too good for that ex-wife of yours. Some people just don't appreciate what they have. It was a typical interaction, supportive but slightly uncomfortable, well-meaning but tinged with gossip. I'd learned to accept these conversations as the price of living in a small town, where everyone knew everyone else's business. On the drive home, Susan asked if it bothered me that people still talked about my divorce. Sometimes, I admitted. But I'd rather have them talking about the truth than believing lies about me being a misuser. Do you think the story will ever die down? Eventually, when something more interesting happens, or when enough time passes that people forget the details. But honestly, I don't care as much as I used to. Let them talk. You've changed a lot since we first met. How so? You're more relaxed, more confident, less angry. She was right. The rage that had fueled my revenge against Elise and Carter had burned itself out, leaving behind a kind of calm certainty about who I was and what I wanted. I no longer felt the need to prove myself or defend my choices to anyone except the people who mattered most. That evening, Jack called with an update on his conversation with Elise. "I decided to meet her for coffee," he said, "just to hear what she had to say." "How did it go?" "Better than I expected, actually." She didn't make excuses or try to blame anyone else. She said she'd made terrible choices and that she understood why Kayla and I were angry with her. "Did you believe her?" "I think so. She seemed genuinely remorseful, not just sorry she got caught. She's been going to therapy and working with a counselor at her church." "That's good. What did you tell her?" "That I was willing to try having a relationship with her, but that it would take time to rebuild trust. She said she understood and that she was willing to work for it." "And Kayla?" "She's going to call Mom this week. We talked about it, and we both think we should give her a chance, but we're going to be careful about it." I felt a mixture of pride and concern. Pride that my children were mature enough to make their own decisions about forgiveness and reconciliation. Concern that they might be setting themselves up for more heartbreak if Elise reverted to her old patterns. "Just remember what I told you," I said. "Take it slow, keep your boundaries, and don't let her guilt you into anything." "We will, Dad, and thanks for not trying to talk us out of it. I know this can't be easy for you. You're both adults. You have the right to make your own choices, even if I don't agree with them." "Do you disagree with this choice?" I thought about it. "I'm skeptical, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope she really has changed, and that you can have a healthy relationship with her. And if she hasn't changed, then you'll learn something important about second chances and the difference between forgiveness and trust." After we hung up, Susan asked how I felt about the kids reconciling with their mother. "Nervous," I admitted, "but also proud of them for being willing to take the risk. It takes courage to forgive someone who's hurt you that badly." "Are you thinking about forgiving her yourself?" "I already have, in a way. I'm not angry anymore, and I don't wish her damage. But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust her or want her back in my life. It just means I'm not carrying around the poison of hatred anymore." That's very wise, or very tired. Like I said, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. 6 months later, Jack called with news that surprised me. "Dad, Mom's engaged." "To who?" "Some guy she met at her church. His name is David, and he's a social worker. She says he knows all about her past and that he's helping her become a better person." I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that she was moving on with her life, skepticism about her motives, and a strange kind of sadness for the woman I'd once loved. "How do you feel about it?" I asked. "Honestly, I'm happy for her. She seems different now, more humble, more aware of how her actions affect other people. And David seems like a good guy." "Have you met him?" "Yeah, a few times. He's nothing like Carter, quiet, thoughtful, really committed to helping people. He works with troubled kids and he's been married before, so he understands about blended families and complicated situations." "That's good. I'm glad she found someone who makes her happy." "Are you really?" "Yeah, I am. I want her to be happy, Jack. I just don't want to be the one responsible for making her happy anymore." "She asked me to tell you something." "What?" "She said to thank you for not trying to turn Kayla and me against her. She said a lot of men in your situation would have poisoned their kids against their ex-wife. But you never did that. You're both smart enough to make your own judgments. You didn't need me telling you what to think. She also said she hopes someday you can forgive her. I already have. But that doesn't mean I want to be friends or that I think what she did was okay. It just means I'm not angry anymore." I think that's all she was hoping for. That evening, I told Susan about Elise's engagement. She listened without comment, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Does it bother you that she's getting married again?" "No," I said, and realized I meant it. I hope she's learned from her mistakes and that this marriage is built on honesty and mutual respect. And if it's not, then it's not my problem. I did my job as her husband for 22 years. Someone else can take the next shift." Susan laughed. "That's a very practical way to look at it." "I'm a practical man." "Yes, you are. It's one of the things I love about you." A year later, Kayla graduated from college with a degree in journalism and a job offer from a major newspaper. Jack got promoted at his cybersecurity firm and bought a house with his fiancée. Both of them had maintained cautious but improving relationships with their mother, who had indeed married David and seemed to be making a genuine effort to be a better person. I was proud of all of them. My children for their maturity and wisdom, and even Elise for apparently learning from her mistakes and working to rebuild her life on a more solid foundation. As for me, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Susan and I had gotten engaged on the anniversary of our first date, and we were planning a small wedding for the following spring. My career was thriving, my children were successful and happy, and I woke up every morning next to someone who loved me for who I actually was. The red Rolex that had started it all was long gone, donated to charity and forgotten. But the lessons it had taught me remained. The importance of paying attention to warning signs, the value of fighting for your reputation and integrity, and the difference between love based on illusion and love based on truth. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted how I'd handled the situation with Elise and Carter. My answer was always the same. I regretted that it had been necessary, but I didn't regret doing it. They had forced my hand by planning to destroy me, and I had responded with the only weapon I had, the truth. The truth had set me free, even though it had been painful at the time. It had cost me a marriage, but it had given me back my self-respect. It had hurt my children in the short term, but it had taught them valuable lessons about integrity and consequences. It had made me enemies, but it had also shown me who my real friends were. Most importantly, it had cleared the way for a better life built on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and genuine affection. I wouldn't trade that for all the red Rolexes in the world. On the morning of my wedding to Susan, as I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie, I thought about the man I'd been 3 years earlier, angry, betrayed, determined to get revenge on the people who had tried to destroy him. That man had served his purpose, but I was glad to leave him behind. The man I was now was calmer, wiser, and infinitely more content. He understood the difference between justice and vengeance, between forgiveness and reconciliation, between love and possession. He had learned that sometimes the best revenge is living well, and that happiness is not about getting everything you want, but about appreciating what you have. As I walked down the aisle to marry the woman who had helped me rebuild my life, I caught sight of Jack and Kayla in the front row, both beaming with pride and happiness. They had grown into remarkable adults despite, or perhaps because of, the trials they had endured. Even Elise was there, sitting in the back with David, having asked permission to attend through Jack. I had agreed, recognizing it as a gesture of closure and respect for the family we had once been. When Susan and I exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other in good times and bad, I meant every word. But I also understood them differently than I had the first time I'd made such promises. Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice you made every day. Honor wasn't just about grand gestures, it was about keeping your word in small things. Cherishing someone wasn't about possessing them, it was about appreciating who they were and supporting who they were becoming. As we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. It had been painful, complicated, and sometimes ugly, but it had led me to exactly where I needed to be. The reception was held in the garden behind our house, surrounded by the flowers Susan had planted and the friends who had supported us through the difficult times. Ray gave a toast about second chances and the importance of fighting for what you believe in. Jack spoke about the lessons his father had taught him about integrity and perseverance. Kayla read a poem about new beginnings and the courage to start over. As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, Susan and I sat on our back porch, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "Any regrets?" she asked, taking my hand. "Only one," I said. "What's that?" "I regret that it took me so long to find you." She smiled and kissed me. Better late than never. Much better. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought us together. If Elise hadn't had an affair, if Carter hadn't left his watch on my nightstand, if I hadn't been observant enough to notice it on that video call, none of this would have happened. I would still be trapped in a marriage built on lies. My children would still believe their mother was someone she wasn't, and I would never have met the woman who was now my wife. In a way, I owed Carter Haynes a debt of gratitude. His arrogance and carelessness had set in motion a chain of events that had ultimately led to my salvation. He had intended to destroy my life, but instead he had given me the chance to build a better one. The last I'd heard, Carter was on his third marriage and his second bankruptcy. His pattern of using and discarding women had finally caught up with him, and his reputation in the advertising world was so damaged that he could barely find work. He was a cautionary tale, a man who had confused wealth with worth and power with respect. Elise, by contrast, seemed to have genuinely learned from her mistakes. Her marriage to David appeared to be stable and based on mutual support rather than mutual exploitation. She had a modest job with a nonprofit organization and lived a simple life focused on service to others rather than personal advancement. I was glad for her, genuinely glad. Not because I still loved her, that part of my heart belonged to someone else now, but because she was the mother of my children and her happiness contributed to theirs. As for me, I had everything I'd ever really wanted: meaningful work, a loving family, and a partner who shared my values and supported my dreams. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I was young and thought I had all the answers, but it was better than anything I could have imagined. The red Rolex had been a symbol of everything that was wrong with my first marriage: the materialism, the deception, the willingness to sacrifice integrity for temporary pleasure. Its absence from my life now was a symbol of everything that was right with my second chance: the simplicity, the honesty, the commitment to building something lasting and real. Funny thing about timepieces, doesn't matter how much they cost. When your time's up, it's up. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to make better use of the time you have left.